Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. That was very enthusiastic. In this video, we're going to be talking about the books that I'm really anticipating going into the first half of 2025. This list is by no means exhaustive because I'm not an oracle. I don't know all the books that are going to come out between now and June or the end of June, but it's just the ones that I know of at the moment after scrolling through a few other creators' videos and then just looking on Goodreads and keeping up with the series that I'm currently reading or caught up with and just making a list based off of that. So we have quite a few to get through, so let's crack into the first book, which is going to be Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is the third book in the Fourth Wing, the Empyrean series by this author, and I think just about everyone is eagerly anticipating this one. It comes out very soon on January 21st, and if you don't know what this is about, this is a series that follows our main character Violet Sorrengail, who had always intended to be part of the scribe quadrant within the world that she lives in, until one day her mum comes up to her and she's like, no daughter of mine is going to be a scribe. You need to enter the Dragon Rider quadrant at Basgiath War College, where basically if you don't get a dragon, you're probably gonna die. And even if you do get a dragon, you'll die. Violet is not keen on this because she knows she is at a serious disadvantage in comparison to the other people that she will be competing against because she has like brittle bones. I think it's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. But on top of that, her mother is like a general in the army that was heavily involved in the murder of a bunch of people's parents who all were part of the rebellion however many years ago. And now the son of one of the people that her mother essentially murdered is at the War College and has an absolute vendetta against her. His name is Xaden Ryerson, and as you can probably expect, a beautiful enemies to lovers romance grows. This series has dragons, it has enemies to lovers, it has combat, it has serious contemptible enemies that seem to be making reappearances. It has everything you could possibly want and so much more, and I'm addicted to this series. I know a lot of people didn't love Iron Flame, but I had a fabulous time reading it, even though I thought it was a little bit too long. So I'm really intrigued for Onyx Storm when it comes out on the 21st of January. Then on the 30th of January, we have Out of the Woods by Hannah Bonam Young, which I think is the sort of next book in the kind of Out on a Limb world, in the same way that, you know, you have Next of Kin and Next to You. And it follows high school sweethearts Saara and Caleb, who've kind of always just been a sure thing, a package deal. You've never had one without the other. The two of them are married, they've been together through life's turmoils and through life's triumphs, until one day Saara starts to wonder, who is she actually without her other half? And so she decides to do something on her own. She decides to put together an event completely independently, until that event fails and Caleb steps in to help her. The rift that follows between them after this memorial event for Sarah's mother goes completely wrong really unearths a whole history of grievances as doubts begin to grow between them, and they wonder if they were the same people that got married at 19 or if they've just gone on two completely separate paths. So in a desperate attempt to fix things and work their way back to the lovers they were at 19 years old, the two decide to go on a grueling hike together, which naturally puts them through a lot of physical trauma that I'm sure will unearth a lot of emotional turmoil and hopefully result in a happily ever after. So this sounds like a kind of second chance romance sort of story, but less so they've already broken up and are now getting back together, and more so they're beginning to question who they are outside of each other, and they need to find their way back to themselves before they can be together. I mean, Hannah Bonam Young is an absolute expert at drawing these really emotional situations into incredibly swoony and just easy to read and addictive romances, so I cannot wait for this next one from her. I cannot wait to read more of her books as well outside of this one, and I think I'm gonna love it. Next up on the 4th of February, we have Dream Girl Drama by Tessa Bailey, which is the third book in the Big Shot series by this author, and it's like a series of connected standalone sports romances. And we follow Sig and Chloe, and Sig is an ice hockey player and his car breaks down one day, so he goes into a country club and stumbles across Chloe, who is a bit of a manic pixie dream girl with a penchant for stealing champagne and a bit of a wild side. Sparks fly between the two of them as they share a moonlight kiss, and they are desperate to find their way back to each other, but that happens in a sort of unexpected way when Sig arrives to a family dinner to meet his father's new girlfriend and finds out that the girlfriend is not just a girlfriend, it's his father's new fiance, and Chloe is about to be his new stepsister. So this means the two are definitely hesitant in order to act on their growing feelings for each other, but Chloe is a harp prodigy desperate to get out of her mother's shadow and her mother's controlling nature. So Sig determines to teach her the ins and outs of independence in Boston, just not independence or togetherness, I guess, in the bedroom. But given both of their very public natures, him being a hockey player Victoria and her being sort of a high society socialite, they know that they can't be together, but their growing attraction keeps pushing them into more and more romantic situations, and they begin to really struggle to keep their relationship just platonic. I am not a huge fan of Tessa Bailey books generally, but there's something about this sports romance series that she's been writing that's really done it for me. I've loved the first book, Fangirl Down. I haven't read the Au Pair Affair, but I think it's another ice hockey one, so I'm looking forward to that. And then obviously we've got our third book, which is going to be ice hockey as well. So she's definitely hitting the mark in terms of what people are looking for within the sort of sports romance world. So yeah, I'm intrigued for this one on the 4th of February. Also on the 4th of February, we have Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, which follows a competitive diver and also a swimmer in a steamy college romance. So first we follow Scarlett, who is a competitive diver, and she is just promising herself that she's just going to keep her head down, focus on getting through med school and recovering from an injury that almost ended her career. She has no time for relationships. And then we have swim captain and just all-round golden boy Lucas Blomqvist, sorry if that's not how you pronounce his name, who thrives on discipline, breaking world records and winning gold medals. On the surface, Lucas and Scarlett have literally nothing in common until an incredibly well-guarded secret slips out, and they work up an arrangement between the two of them that naturally leads to a very steamy fling that turns into something more as these two dive into the deep end of some dangerous waters. I love so much of the books by Ali Hazelwood because they are just a fun, easy, romantic, kind of smutty, good time, and that is all I want sometimes when I'm just having a bad day or in the mood for something easy and don't want anything too complicated. Ali Hazelwood is almost always the place to go. I loved her Steminist novella series, so I'm keen to see what she does and how much sort of feminism she brings into now this sort of sports romance, I guess, but in the pool. I don't think I've ever read a sports romance between a swimmer and a diver, or just like a pool related sports romance at all. That'll be interesting, like an interesting new experience for me. So yeah, I can't wait for this one on the 4th of February as well. Next up on the 13th of February, we have Cursebound, which is the sequel to Fable by Saara El-Arifi, and this is a sapphic fantasy romance following two sisters. First we have Yurin, who is sort of a renowned warrior in the Elven army, and then her younger sister Lettel, who's just trying to make her career as a diviner. Until one day, Lettel tells a prophecy that relates to Yurin, saying, I think she'll find success in the east or something. And then out on one of her expeditions, Yurin makes a fatal decision to go east and ends up in an ambush that basically massacres her entire army that she's leading, so she gets banished. Lettel and I think another friend from home decide to follow her in this banishment, and they come across a whole world of fae that haven't been seen in a millennium, and both Yurin and Lettel always believed and were told that the fae were kind of the enemy, but now they're being exposed to this world and maybe beginning to question their prior loyalties to the elven world. And this book was one of those classic, like, their world expands and therefore their knowledge of what's really at play expands, and it was perfectly executed. The sapphic romance between Yurin and the love interest was incredible. I think from memory there was also a bit of a romance between Lettel and another one of the companions, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And then there were also these kind of like animal companion beings as well, which were quite cool. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to see the next book and see how they kind of work their way further into the fae world. Next up on the 25th of February, we have The Charlie Method by Elle Kennedy, which is the third book in the Campus Diaries spin-off from the sort of Briar U and Off Campus series by this author. So this one follows the kids of various characters in both of those earlier series. And we're following Charlotte Kingston, who is a college senior who lives two very different lives. So by day, she's a sort of perfect sorority girl, a STEM student in biomedical engineering. She's doing all the right things. But then by night, she has a bit of a steamy fling with two separate men on a dating app. Both of those two separate men turn out to be players on the hockey team. So we've got Will Dunn, whose father, I believe, is a politician of some kind, like a congressman or something. So he has a very high standard that he has to live up to. And then we've got Becca, who I think is an Australian who's moved over to the US, I guess, to attend university. And they kind of have their own little situation going on where I guess they team up a lot of the times in relationships, and Charlotte gets embroiled in all of that. And I'm really excited to see, I guess, the first kind of throuple romance that I think Elle Kennedy has ever written. I do not know a lot about her backlist, so I could be wrong in that, but it's the first throuple romance I've ever seen from Elle Kennedy. So I'm intrigued to see how she tackles that, and I'm excited to see this romance because it was hinted at in, I think, both of the prior books in this series, and I've been desperate to see what happens there ever since I read The Dixon Rule and the other one that's now escaping my brain. I have it right behind me. The Graham Effect. Next up on the 27th of February, we have got Rebel Witch by Kristen at Ciccarelli. And again, another one that I am beyond excited for. This is the finale to the duology, which is like the Crimson Moth duology, I think. In the US, I think the first book was called Heartless Hunter, but over here it was called Crimson Moth. And basically this book follows an illustrious character called the Crimson Moth, who seems to be saving witches left, right, and center. And we follow two main characters. The first is Rune Winters, and basically their history is as the witch hunters were sort of coming across her and her grandmother basically told her to go and turn her in as a witch so that Rune Winters could get away. And ever since then, she's kind of been separated, I guess, from the rest of the witches. They've kind of looked down on her as a traitor and a betrayer. But she is actually the Crimson Moth, who is this, as I said, illustrious character who seems to be rescuing all these witches from persecution. And then the second character that we follow is Gideon, who is a witch hunter. So it's the classic witch hunter romance. And after an incredibly traumatic situation relating to him and his family and a witch that I think he had a previous romance with in the past, he is absolutely dedicated to his cause, and he thinks he knows who the Crimson Moth is, and he believes that that is Rune. So in an effort to find out her true identity, he gets closer to her and they start fake dating, but then she also has ulterior motives relating to this whole fake dating thing, because she's thinking that she can get closer to him to find out where he has this one particular witch that she's been looking for, and also to cover up her identity. She feels like if she acts as a just regular daft socialite human, then he will kind of not think that she's the Crimson Moth. So this is an enemies to lovers romance. It's witchy, it's got persecution of witches, it's got like an adventure plot line, as well as like sabotage, a betrayal, and all the things that you could possibly want in like a witchy enemies to lovers romance. The first book ended on this kind of cliffhanger situation, so I am desperately chomping at the bit to get into the second book and finish out this duology. It'll be another series ticked off my list for this year, so that is a plus as well, so I cannot wait for this in February. Next up on the 4th of March, we've got Wildside by Elsie Silver, and this is the next book in the Rose Hill series, which are all single parent romances. And this follows Tabby and Reese. And Tabby is someone who's always kind of dreamed of her wedding day. She's always had this idea in her head of how it would be, until the actual day comes and it is not anything like she wanted, because she is marrying her enemy. Now the reason she's doing this is because her nephew's guardianship has been contested. I assume that she is the guardian for the nephew, and she needs to do anything she can in order to keep him. And so marrying Reese Dupree seems to be the way to do that. He is a man who is secretive, broody, and incredibly infuriating, whose work takes him away on weekends, and then he comes back with mysterious bruises and he won't tell her anything about what he's been doing. He just won't talk to her at all, which would be fine, except when he's not talking, he's staring, and the way that he's staring is borderline indecent. So this is telling me that this is a man-obsessed kind of romance, and that is just like the best kind sometimes. But ultimately, he's her enemy. He's the man that betrayed her. So living under one roof seems like a match made in hell, until the tension starts to turn from anger into romantic, and I'm assuming sexual tension, as the two sort of work together to not only allow her to keep the guardianship of her nephew, but then I assume fall in love along the way. I'm again intrigued by this one. I'm intrigued by whatever the mystery is behind Reese's job. Is he like in the FBI or a cop or an undercover kind of guy, or is he just like a bad dude who goes and like fights on the weekends? I don't know. I didn't love Wild Love by this author, but I am told that people who didn't love Wild Love will probably love Wild Eyes, and that is coming up on my TBR soon, so hopefully I will love that and love this. Next up on the 27th of March, we've got The Shadow Bride by Shelby Mahurin, which is the sequel to The Scarlet Veil, which is a spin-off of the Serpent and Dove trilogy by this author. And this follows Seeley, who was kind of one of the side characters in the first trilogy. She was, I think, the first love of one of our main characters, but then she's also like really quiet and demure, and everybody kind of underestimates her and shoves her to the side. And so this series, I guess, is her really coming into her own. So mild spoilers, I guess, for the ending of Serpent and Dove. So if you haven't read that one, then skip ahead to the next book that I'm going to mention in the anticipated releases. So this follows Seeley, who, following the ending of the Serpent and Dove trilogy, she's become one of the first female chasseurs in the world that they live in. And a chasseur is basically a witch hunter, or kind of like the authority figures. They were previously witch hunters. I can't remember if they still are. And not only is she defying expectations, she's also defying her fiance, who is like the head of the chasseurs, and his name's Jean-Luc. And he doesn't seem to be only worried for her safety, but kind of worried for his reputation as well. So determined to prove herself, Celie uncovers or finds out about this mysterious other power in their world that seems to be leaving bodies in its wake. So she tracks down who she believes to be the real killer and comes across a whole world of mysterious beings and creatures that she's only ever heard about in nursery rhymes. This is a vampire kind of romance, so I guess that'll tell you a little bit about that. And it just uncovers more of the world and more of the secrets that have been kept in this world on top of everything that we discovered in the Serpent and Dove trilogy. I loved the beginnings of the romance between the two main characters in the first book, and I'm intrigued to see how that develops into the second book. And I'm intrigued to see how the sort of conflict between her and Jean-Luc develops as well, because he was not a character that I liked very much, either in the Serpent and Dove trilogy or in this. So hopefully he just like goes away, please, because I don't like him. But I'm intrigued for this book. So next up on the 1st of April, we've got Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. And I cannot tell you, when I Googled this title to find out when it was being published, just how many Taylor Swift related references came up, because it took me like a good 5 seconds to be like, oh yeah, that's a line from one of her songs. But anyway, this particular book follows Samantha and Xavier. And Samantha is just looking at Xavier like there is no way perfection can exist in this way, because Xavier not only is a veterinarian, but he is like Greek god level hot, and he's like holding a kitten in his arms. So she's thinking this man is literally perfect until he opens his mouth and he says the wrong thing, and all he can do is apologize. And Samantha loves nothing more than proving an asshole wrong, unless he can admit that he was wrong. And all of a sudden they're spending one magical and seemingly endless date together, possibly the best in living history, until Samantha is forced to admit that her family is in crisis. And she says to Xavier, please just remember this as one magical night, but it can never happen again. This is the end of this. Of us. Only no amount of distance or time is ever enough to make these two lovebirds forget about each other and the beauty and happiness that they brought each other. And so they begin to prove that the only thing better than one perfect memory is one perfect life together. This is Abby Jimenez, which means this book is going to pack an emotional punch. It's going to be an emotional gut punch. It's going to kill me. It's gonna just absolutely destroy me and bring me to tears, but I'm going to love every single minute of it, and I'm going to go back to Abby Jimenez and beg for more. She is just an expert at creating these characters that you can't help but fall in love with, that are beautifully fleshed out, that then go through just the worst of situations, God, I can't speak today, and then kind of make them come back together in this just beautifully romantic way. And it's just incredible. I have no words. She is an expert in her craft, and I cannot wait to read another book by her. Next up on the 13th of May, we've got A Curse Inked in Bone, which is the sequel to A Fate Inked in Blood. And I think this is a duology by Danielle Jensen. So this book is a sort of Norse mythology kind of Viking inspired story where people, some people have been kind of like blessed by the Viking gods and granted powers that the Viking gods had. So our main character is a shield maiden, which basically means she's a female warrior, and she has been like blessed with the powers of the goddess of shield maidens. So her name is Freya, our main character's name is Freya, and she is stuck in this unwanted, horrible marriage until one day her husband betrays her and basically sticks an axe in her back, both literally and figuratively, I think, that ends with the region's Jarl, which is like the king, the guy in power, finding out about her abilities and essentially just saying, you, hun, because of some prophecy, are now going to become my wife. So that marriage that you had before is just like null and void. Don't worry about that. You're going to become my wife. And that's not what the romance is, if you were thinking that it is, because the romance actually happens between her, Freya, and this Jarl's son, Björn, who has been assigned to sort of keep an eye on Freya and keep her in line and protect her and, you know, make sure that she doesn't like run away, essentially. So the Jarl essentially forces Freya into a blood oath and forces Björn to protect her, and desperate to prove her abilities and to fight on her own and be independent, she then trains and fights and survives somehow against these constant trials that the gods seem to be setting for her, with the greatest trial perhaps being her having to resist the growing feelings, the growing attraction affection that she has for Björn. So this book, I am excited for it, but not to the same level as some of the other books in this list, purely because I really enjoyed a lot of the elements of A Fate Inked in Blood, but the only thing I didn't enjoy was that Björn seemed like a little bit too soft for me. Like in my head, when I think Viking warrior, I think like hard man, kind of brutal, a little bit mean, bit grumpy, and probably a little bit alpha-y, and Björn just didn't give me those vibes. In fact, Freya was like more of the alpha in this situation, and I know that probably makes me a shit feminist, but like I kind of wanted it the other way around. But anyway, I am intrigued to see where the rest of this story goes, especially after the cliffhanger at the end of the first book. So this one comes out in May, I think I said. Yep, May 13, and I'm excited. I'm generally excited for it. Next up on the 20th of May, we have The Night and the Moth, which is a new book by Rachel Gillig, who is the author of the incredible Shepherd King duology with One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns, I think. I loved that duology, and so this is a new book from her and a new series, I think, as well. Now, I know nothing about this, so I'm gonna read you the blurb because this is actually my first time reading the blurb. I just knew that this book was coming and it's by her, and therefore I immediately am anticipating it, but I don't actually know anything about it. So it says, Sybil Delling has spent 9 years dreaming of having no dreams at all. Like the other foundling girls who traded a decade of service for a home in the great cathedral, Sybil is a diviner. In her dreams, she receives visions from 6 unearthly figures known as omens. From them, she can predict terrible things before they occur, and lords and common folk alike travel across the kingdom of Trom's windswept moors to learn their futures by her dreams. Just as she and her sister diviners near the end of their service, a mysterious knight arrives at the cathedral. Rude, heretical, and devilishly handsome, the knight Roderick has no respect for Sybil's visions, but when Sybil's fellow diviners begin to vanish one by one, she has no choice but to seek his help in finding them. For the world outside the cathedral's cloister is wrought with peril. Only the gods have the answers she is seeking, and as much as she'd rather avoid Roderick's dark eyes and sharp tongue, only a heretic can defeat a god. And that is the end of this list. Those are all of the anticipated releases that I have coming out in the first half of 2025 that I know of. There are some other books that I am looking forward to, but I haven't read other books in that series, so I can't really call them anticipated because I haven't read from the author before, or I haven't read other books in the series, so I don't know how I'm going to really mesh with them. Examples are like The Strawberry Pancake House by Laurie Gilmore. I'm looking forward to that one coming out, but I haven't read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe or any of the other books, despite owning, I think, all of her other books in this series. So let me know in the comments down below if you have any books that you're really anticipating for the first half of 2025. Please do drop them because I am forever adding to my anticipated releases list and I want all the recommendations pretty please. And if you like this video, as always, please do let me know by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I release new videos. And do go and check out my TikTok, which is also linked in the comments down below, where I post kind of more immediate reactions to the books that I'm reading, reviews, like vlog-ish style content, and also just some funny kind of lip sync things, or at least I think they're funny. Do go and check that out. It's a lot of fun down there. But that is it from me today, guys. So I hope you are having an absolutely amazing day wherever in the world you are having it, and I will hopefully see you very soon in my next video. Bye.